speaking of which, guys, don't forget about All Family Pharmacy. You've seen how hard it can be to access important medications like ivermectin, and it's critical to have on hand these kind of medications for any emergency and to be prepared in a time of crisis. That's why I want to tell you about All Family Pharmacy. They're cutting through the nonsense and make it easy to get hard to find medications when you need them most. They'll provide the prescription, no hoops to jump through, no waiting rooms, no hassle, and they deliver it right to your door. All Family Pharmacy even lets you order in bulk so you can stay ahead of the curve. Head over to allfamilypharmacy.com/Don Jr., DONJR, for 10% off your first order. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Don Jr. Don't forget and check them out. Hey guys, and welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. Hope everyone's doing well. Big show for you today because once again, the regime media is doing what it always does, ignoring the wins, hiding the hypocrisy, and protecting some of the sleaziest people in American politics. Because while the media is still obsessed with whatever fake news narrative they can cook up from one more anti-Trump news cycle to another, the actual scorecard looks pretty darn good for America. Strategically, we're stronger. Economically, confidence is back. At the border, order is back. And politically, some of these Democrats are getting exposed in a way that is way past due. And yes, we're going to get into Eric Swalwell because if there's ever been a guy who deserved to be dog-walked on his own hypocrisy and corruption, it is him. We're going to talk about the border numbers that should have been front page news everywhere. And of course, more absolute insanity and fraud in the state of California. Hard to believe. There's more, guys. There's more. They just are probably scratching the surface, and what they've found so far is already insane. So guys, make sure you're liking, sharing, subscribing so you never miss one of these major episodes. Just hit the like button. It's so easy. Share it with your friends later on, okay? Just text it to them, whatever it is. You guys need to help get the word out. If you do miss the show here on Rumble, or if your friends get their podcast perhaps in a different way, go over to Apple, go over to Spotify, and catch it there. And for all of the top headlines that we cover on the show, go over to my news app, MXM News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias. And of course, don't forget about our brave sponsors for having the guts to support this program. And guys, we have another familiar face sponsoring the show now, Goldco. Gold just surged past $5,000 an ounce. Silver blew past 100. And the U.S. just added silver to the critical mineral list, meaning it's now considered crucial for American security and economic survival. This isn't speculation. This is real. That's why I've renewed my partnership with the #1 rated gold company, Goldco. A+ rated by the BBB, the Better Business Bureau, and they've helped Americans place over $3 billion in gold and silver. So visit donjrgold.com, DONJR gold.com, to get a free 2026 gold and silver kit. And because you're part of this audience, you get up to 10% back in bonus silver or gold just for getting started. Again, that's donjrgold.com. Do it now. Educate yourself. What do you have to lose? Let's get into all of the top headlines. I want to start in Iran because this is one of those stories where if you really want to learn what's going on, you've got to block out all of the noise. And God knows there is a lot of noise. But you got to block it out and look at the details of what's really going on. Your favorite president is reestablishing American control over the strategic lanes that matter across the globe. And the people who spend years saying, America's in decline and yada, 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 suddenly have nothing to say about it. Because if you look at the map and the data, more and more key trade routes across the world are now controlled by the United States. Remember how we've talked about supply chain issues and all these kinds of things? Well, we're fixing those problems by controlling those routes. Check this out.
With our alliances with the Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, and our control of the Strait of Hormuz against Iran, the United States now controls every access point that China has to get to the other side of Southeast Asia, to get to India, to get to Africa, and to get to Europe. Every trade route China needs to go west is now controlled by the United States of America. Donald Trump did that. Pete Hegseth negotiated the deal with Indonesia. Look, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to hear this on ABC, CBS, NBC, probably not CNN, and certainly not MS Now. You're not going to hear about this much in the New York Times or USA Today or any of the other major newspapers in this country. The Trump administration has just put itself in a position to have the United States control every access point China has for trading west to Europe, west to Africa, west to India, west to other parts of Southeast Asia. The United States military now controls those routes. Have you heard about that in the press? I bet you haven't. We have pushed China out of the Western Hemisphere.
Think about that for a second. For years, we were told that China was 10 feet tall and that America was fading, that the global order was slipping away from us, and that we, just had to get used to it. Just, deal with it. No, we don't. We didn't have to get used to it. We had to get serious again. And that's the difference between strength and weakness. That's the difference between having adults in charge and having these empty suit globalist bureaucrat clowns who think issuing a white paper is the same thing as projecting power and utilizing the power that you have. Because when America actually decides to enforce its interests, when America acts like the dominant power that it is, the maps change very, very quickly. And by the way, this isn't happening in some vacuum. It's showing up in markets, in confidence indexes, in investment as well. Check this out.
On the campaign trail in 2024, President Trump looked voters in the eye and promised them he would sign the largest tax cuts in the history of our country. And on Independence Day last year, President Trump and congressional Republicans delivered, passing the largest tax cut in history for working and middle-class Americans, including no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security. They also passed unprecedented tax relief for small businesses, farmers, workers, and families. With tax day officially here, the numbers prove these tax cuts have been nothing short of extraordinary. More than 53 million filers claimed at least one of President Trump's signature new tax cuts. The average refund this filing season is more than $3,400. The Trump administration has issued more refunds and larger refunds than in any year of the history of our country. And I will allow Secretary Bessent to break down the numbers in greater detail. President Trump and Republicans in Congress have always believed that the American people know how to spend their money better than the government does. But what the American people must not forget is that every single Democrat in Congress voted against these tax refunds. The media has largely omitted this fact and other critical details in their stories covering the benefits of the Trump tax cuts. If the Democrats in Congress had gotten their way and blocked President Trump's historic legislation, Americans would have faced the largest tax hike in history, nearly $4 trillion. The average taxpayer would have seen a 22% increase in their tax rates. Democrats in Congress have proven over and over again that they are the affordability frauds who believe the government should keep more of the American people's hard-earned money. This president and Republicans in Congress fundamentally believe that Americans deserve to keep more of their hard-earned paychecks. It's a clear contrast for American families to keep in mind.
The S&P 500 just closed above 7,000. Confidence is back. That's huge for your 401k and your savings and for America. Capital moves when people believe the country is being run by serious people. Businesses invest when they believe the rules are common sense and America is no longer being managed by ideologues and bureaucrats, by lunatics. That matters, guys. And it matters that the same people who told you tariffs would destroy the economy, it would destroy energy dominance that would never come back, and that American leverage was somehow a relic of the past, are wrong again. Wrong about growth, wrong about markets, and wrong about power. Honestly, they're wrong about basically everything. Here's Secretary Wright appearing before Congress this week with the latest numbers.
Under President Trump's leadership, we have put the department back on mission, delivering affordable, reliable, and secure energy to the American people. Let me highlight what this looks like. We have taken decisive steps to restore grid reliability. Using emergency authorities under Section 202C of the Federal Power Act, we kept critical baseload generation online after DOE analysis warned outage risk could increase by up to 100-fold by 2030 due to supply shortfalls if we had continued on the previous trajectory. This action and the market response to our actions preserved 17 gigawatts of critical dispatchable generation for the American people. Hundreds of American lives were saved by these actions during Winter Storm Fern. Historic cold drove record heating and electricity demand. Dispatchable energy, natural gas, coal, hydro, and nuclear were the MVPs of the grid. In New England, at peak demand, which is what matters with an electricity grid, hydrocarbons, hydro, and nuclear power provided 95% of the electricity. Wind, solar, and batteries provided 2%, far less than the 3% that was derived from burning wood and trash. The lesson: when reliability is on the line, dispatchable energy shows up. We work to establish American energy leadership globally. Since President Trump ended the previous administration's reckless LNG export approval ban, the department has approved more than 19 billion cubic feet a day.
This is what competence looks like, guys. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for American energy, stop kneecapping your own producers, and stop treating normal economic growth like some sort of moral crime. And of course, the Democrats would rather tax, regulate, and lecture this country into a recession than ever admit that prosperity actually comes from production. But don't take my word for it. Here are just a few of the facts on what Democrats want for your wallet.
President Trump and Republicans in Congress have always believed that the American people know how to spend their money better than the government does. But what the American people must not forget is that every single Democrat in Congress voted against these tax refunds. The media has largely omitted this fact and other critical details in their stories covering the benefits of the Trump tax cuts. If the Democrats in Congress had gotten their way and blocked President Trump's historic legislation, Americans would have faced the largest tax hike in history, nearly $4 trillion. The average taxpayer would have seen a 22% increase in their tax rates. Democrats in Congress have proven over and over again that they are the affordability frauds who believe the government should keep more of the American people's hard-earned money. This president and Republicans in Congress fundamentally believe that Americans deserve to keep more of their hard-earned paychecks. It's a clear contrast for American families to keep in mind.
That's the contrast. We want more leverage abroad, more production at home, more growth, and more confidence. That's everything. And what do Democrats offer? More taxes, more regulation, more bureaucracy, more weakness, more dependence, more lectures, and always more excuses. That is why this show matters. Because if you listened only to the people who cover politics for a living, you'd have no idea how much of the real story is being buried on purpose. Now, speaking of stories they're burying on purpose, let's talk about the border, because these numbers are absolutely devastating to the entire left-wing mythology around immigration. For years, we were told this chaos was inevitable, guys. You just got to accept it. We were told mass asylum abuse was just the new normal. We were told there was no way to regain control. It's just too late. We're just going to have to accept it. We were told compassion meant surrender and sovereignty was somehow mean. And then Trump comes back, and almost overnight, the numbers collapse. Check this out.
Let's talk about what's happened with legal immigration under the second Trump administration. Legal entries by asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexican border, legal entry points, are down 99.9%. Take a look at what happened essentially as President Donald Trump took office. When Joe Biden was in office, 45,000 sought asylum. In January of 2024 alone, the drop-off right here in January of 2025, happening again with the beginning of the presidency of Donald Trump. Now, let's take a look at refugee admissions from abroad. It's a similar story. The Trump administration slashing the number of refugees admitted in the United States. You can see the dashed line where President Trump takes office, representing the steep decline, a 90% drop in the numbers. Nosedive, January 2025. The cap for fiscal year 2026 is just 7,500. So the monthly average for the rest of the year will be 500 refugee claims. Let's keep going. Cuts to legal entry are now likely to be 2.5 times higher than illegal entries. Take a look at this graph and digest it for just a moment. There's a lot going on here, a lot of colors. Let's separate it like this. This part of the chart represents illegal entries into the United States. It shows Border Patrol arrests and gotaways. But let's focus on legal entries into the United States. This is a breakdown between 2024 and now of legal entries in the United States. We're talking about refugees, asylum seekers. We're talking about spousal visas, family reunification, H-1B visas, everything down dramatically under President Donald Trump, declining 132,000 so far in his administration, in part, at least on the H-1B visas, driven by the $100,000 fee that is required now to support an H-1B visa. That program alone, which received a lot of conversation, H-1B visas, down 25%. The point is, while the conversation over immigration has faded into the background, and justifiably much of the country talks about Iran, there have been massive victories in talking about gains at the border, gains in immigration, becoming stricter when it comes to not just illegal, but legal immigration, so that hopefully in the future we see fewer stories like what we saw this week out of Georgia.
Down 99.9%. Not 8%, not 12%, not some little marginal improvement that the media can spin as statistical noise. No, 99.9%. That means all of the people who told you nothing could be done, remember that one for years? You just can't do anything about it. They were lying. They didn't lack solutions. They lacked the will. They lacked the resolve to do anything. They didn't have a policy problem. They had a loyalty problem. Their loyalty, of course, was to the activist NGOs, the asylum racket, the open border donor class, and to the left-wing lawyers who take money and make money every time America is forced to pretend it has no right to actually defend itself. And while normal Americans like you are looking at those numbers and saying, finally, somebody is enforcing the damn law, the left is still trying to sabotage enforcement in any way they can. This is why sanctuary city fights matter. This is why these blue state lawsuits matter. This is why every battle between the administration and these left-wing governors matters. Because when Washington finally decides to secure the border, the Democrats immediately start looking for side doors, backdoors, legal tricks, and propaganda campaigns to keep the pipeline and obviously the money flowing. Because whether it's enforcement at the border, enforcement of law and order in our cities, or enforcing our will at the Straits of Hormuz, Democrats find a way to be totally against it. No matter where in the world it is, they're just against it.
I will never set timelines on behalf of the President of the United States, but with respect to the blockade, as you know, it has been fully implemented, and it's being enforced against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports. I want to make that point clear. I've seen some misreporting on that as well. This includes all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And our U.S. forces in the region are supporting the freedom of navigation for vessels that are transiting the strait to and from non-Iranian ports. So I know some in the press were confused about that. We are supporting the freedom of navigation, just not with respect to any tanker or vessel that would benefit the economy of Iran as these negotiations continue.
And yes, that clip was about Iran. But the principle, guys, the principle is exactly the same. Enforcement only matters if you actually mean it. If you're serious, people adapt fast. If you're weak, everyone games the system. That's the Trump difference. Everyone knows he actually means it when he says these things. And by the way, if you want to understand just how sick the priorities are on the left, look at what Christopher Rufo exposed out in California. He's a regular guest on the show. He's been here a lot. Look at what he found. This is insane. According to Rufo's reporting for the City Journal, California's Medicaid system is covering cross-sex hormones, breast implants, and even sex change surgeries for illegal aliens who are also homeless. I mean, wow. That seems like a real priority. They're homeless. We'd rather give them boobs and a sex change operation than, I don't know, make them productive, get them out of our country if they're illegal aliens. And remember, Kamala wanted this for prisoners as well. She wanted to make sure that prisoners, okay, maybe in jail for murder, maybe in jail for life, could really live out their dream of being trans. So, think about the stack of priorities there. Not citizens first, not veterans first, not working families first for sure, not taxpayers first, illegal aliens first, homeless ones to be exact, and not just for emergency care or basic treatment, for trans insanity. They're still pushing it. It's still their top issue. It's still their hill to die on, while the rest pay taxes to fund it. That's not compassion. That is ideology. That is ideological insanity with your money behind it. You could not script a more perfect summary of elite left-wing priorities if you tried. They don't put Americans first. They don't even pretend to anymore. Their instincts are always the same. Reward law-breaking, subsidize dysfunction, attack common sense, and then they call you cruel or a racist or a misogynist or a transphobe or whatever if you object. Which brings me to our next story. The incredible fall of Fang Fang lovers Eric Swalwell. Now, who has just not political problems anymore, guys. He doesn't just have political problems. I know he dropped out of the governor's race, and apparently he's dropping out of Congress. But now, it seems, Swalwell has legal and criminal problems as well. This guy spent years positioning himself like he was some sort of moral authority. He was on his high horse day in and day out. Who cares if he was sleeping with a Chinese spy while on an intelligence committee? I mean, they let that stuff go. They all knew for years, but you know what? He was their useful idiot, so they kept him in there. He was some grand inquisitor, some cable news tough guy who was going to lecture America about decency and truth and believing all women every time, right? Believe them all. And accountability. Meanwhile, this is the same clown who got famous for hanging around Fang Fang, the Chinese spy. This is the same guy who tried to act like Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, should be presumed guilty because of multiple allegations that no one seemed to be able to put together from college, while he was a federal judge for years in the public eye. No one said a peep about him until, now he's going to be a conservative on the Supreme Court. Now we're going to go all in. And now that allegations are pointed at him, suddenly now everyone's lying. Although, I don't know, man. I've been watching on X and Truth and all these things. I see the videos. They don't seem like they're AI, guys. You know how you know that? Because he's not saying that they're AI. He was doing these things. But now, suddenly, magically, he is the victim. Standards don't apply anymore, guys. That's not just hypocrisy. That is the entirety of the Democrat playbook in one disgusting package. Here's one of the accusers speaking out just this week.
He raped me. and he choked me. And while he was choking me, I lost consciousness. And I thought I died. I did not consent to any sexual activity. Although I did not undergo a rape kit at the time, I disclosed the assault to the people closest to me. I also recorded these events in my handwritten calendar. The assault and its impact were later documented during my therapy sessions at a sexual assault center in Connecticut. It had a profound impact on my mental health. I self-medicated in an unhealthy way. I did not want to live anymore. I cried all the time for years. At the time, I was in a dating relationship with a boyfriend I was fully committed to. I've never cheated in my life, and I would never have engaged in a consensual sexual encounter with Eric Swalwell.
I don't know, guys, so I'm curious. Where are all the sanctimonious lectures now? Where are all the fake news moralists who told you the standard was to take accusations seriously? They seem really quiet this week. It's odd. It's shocking. Where are the cable anchors who wanted you to believe there was no such thing as due skepticism whenever it involved a Republican? They're gone. Totally silent. It's as though they're not even covering the news this week. Maybe they're just on vacation, guys. Maybe they just took the week off. You know? There's always an excuse. Because again, the rules are never the rules. The rules are just weapons. Okay? They use them when they can hurt you. And they throw them in the trash the second those same standards boomerang back at them. And it wasn't that long ago that, Shifty Adam Schiff, Pencil Neck Schiff, Bull Schiff, as many call him, and others were out endorsing and proclaiming the greatness of Eric Swalwell in his run for governor. Check it out.
I know the Golden State.
You couldn't script a better image of the Democrat machine if you tried. One of the swampiest, lyingest, dirtiest faces in the entire party. Okay, the entire Democrat Party, Adam Schiff, standing there with one of the most shameless hypocrites in Congress. Okay, acting like, everything is normal, just fine, nothing to see here, folks. Acting like there's nothing to answer for. Acting like the rules are still only for other people because that's what they're used to. They've created a system that enabled that. And then doing a complete 180 and acting like it never happened. I have no idea. I've never met this guy before in my life. Who is this guy? That's the bubble they live in. And remember Swalwell during the Kavanaugh confirmation smear campaign. Swalwell was on TV every night. Okay, much like Adam Schiff, he never met a camera he didn't love. Presuming guilt based on no evidence whatsoever. But when he's accused with mountains of evidence, with video, multiple people, now he changes his tune. Here's Swalwell then and now to give you a little juxtaposition of how things are.
Continued demeaning of victims of sexual assault, people who deserve to be heard, who deserve for their allegations to be investigated, and a president who wants to just rush this through. He criticized the Senate for even taking this long, Ari. And so for Brett Kavanaugh's sake, if he is innocent, I hope tomorrow he opens his statement and says, you know what? Bring in all the victims, allow them to be heard, allow them to be questioned. That will clear his name if he's indeed innocent. And if he's not, for the sake of the credibility of the court, I hope that the senators would vote against him.
And Congressman, as I say to so many guests when they are hit with breaking news, NBC News is reporting, we're going to hear from this reporter momentarily, Casey Hunt, who's here, the Senate probing a brand new and separate allegation of misconduct against Judge Kavanaugh. Casey Hunt, what are you reporting?
Hi, Ari. Well, we have learned that we have a committee, and in it are work behind the while in peak.
Big story, Anonymous, who
and how they say nations figure out, okay, we are seeing the scrutiny of 1998 with him.
And so consider this hearing.
The brakes on it and investigate it. But Ari, I've seen this in many courtrooms where it's very easy to isolate one incident and, shine inaccuracies or inconsistencies on that case. But the more and more cases that are separate and independent that look the same, pretty soon a prosecutor starts to say to a jury, and this is not a jury, but it's allegations that the arrows are pointing in the same direction. And what are the chances that 3 or 4 women independently who never met each other would have similar experiences with one person? So either, Ari, this person committed these horrific acts, or he is the single unluckiest person in the world for these people to conspire and make up lies against him. But it's a very hard case to make, the more allegations that come in.
And even the counter.
Did you ever behave inappropriately with female staffers?
No, it's false. And also, some of the allegations I've seen, which is that we've had NDAs in the office. There's never been an allegation, and there's never been a settlement. And, I will also just take stock that, look, we're 27 days before an election starts.
That is exactly the kind of clip that tells the whole story with their own words. Same mouth, same politician, same fake moral posture, entirely different standard the second it became inconvenient for him, for his party, for his ideology. And this is why people hate politicians, guys. Not because politics is messy. People understand that. They hate politicians like Swalwell because he accuses everyone of doing exactly what he's doing himself, seemingly endlessly. This guy went out there and tried to posture as a guardian of women, a guardian of truth, a guardian of accountability. And if these allegations had been against a Republican, he would have been on TV every night, foaming at the mouth, demanding resignations, hearings, prosecutions, tears, candlelight vigils, the whole thing. But because it's him, well, the machine suddenly just turns off. The machine just forgets how any of that actually works. And while we're on the subject of people who lecture America while rotting the country from the inside, let me show you another story that should have every parent, every taxpayer, and every serious person in this country paying attention. Here are the facts, guys. A Chinese student, again, at the Indiana University, pleaded guilty after trying to smuggle E. coli DNA into the United States from China, concealed in his clothing. Why would a Chinese student smuggle E. coli into the country? Not because it was in his salad, but in his clothing. Not vitamins, not paperwork, genetic material. And this isn't some harmless academic mix-up, guys. It ties to a broader pattern of cases involving Chinese nationals, research institutions, and sensitive biological materials here in the United States. Remember COVID? Kind of sounds like that. We have no idea what's going on. Oh, yeah, we're definitely not studying it in the lab that studies the exact virus in question at the exact place that was ground zero. Oh, yeah, total coincidence. We'll shut down travel inside our country, but, we won't stop them going to Europe and the rest of the world. That's why this matters. The Chinese Communist Party and the networks around it do not see our universities, our labs, our visa systems, our openness as something to respect. They see it as something to exploit. To what end? Seemingly to almost any end that could destroy America. And every time one of these stories comes out, you can practically hear the same old crowd yawning and telling you not to overreact. No, overreaction is not the problem, guys. Complacency is the problem. Turning a blind eye to this is a serious, serious freaking problem. If you're smuggling biological material into this country, concealing it in your clothing, and tying into a broader pattern of similar cases at places like Michigan and other labs around the country, then maybe, guys, just maybe, the people screaming about xenophobia every time someone raises the CCP infiltration, maybe they're the ones who have some explaining to do. Okay? No different than what we were talking about last time about birthright citizenship and Chinese farms creating American citizens by just simply being born on the soil and going back to China to be indoctrinated and educated. And then guess what? They can come to America. They're American citizens. They can vote. They can get into government. Hell, they could possibly even run for president one day. Huh. I wonder what's wrong about this system. I wonder if they'd allow us to do that. This is how decline happens. A country gets so addicted to its own fake moral vanity that it stops defending itself. It starts treating vigilance like paranoia. It starts treating common sense like extremism. Sound familiar? Yeah, it does. And then one day, it wakes up and it realizes everyone else took advantage of that utter stupidity. No thanks, guys. Not anymore. Now we're actually prosecuting it. And there's a broad theme running through this whole episode. Strength and sanity are coming back. But the institutional left is still revealing just how corrupt, just how dishonest and anti-American it really is. The Department of Justice just released a massive report on how the Biden administration weaponized the FACE Act against pro-life Americans and people of faith. Okay? It's wild that they can do this. We're talking about an 800-plus page report laying out how the law was used aggressively against pro-life activists, while attacks on churches and pro-life centers got treated with, I don't know, let's just say a whole lot less urgency, if any. Again, this is the same crowd that spent years pretending the Justice Department was, I don't know, some sort of neutral guardian of democracy. The same people who screamed about norms and institutions, the same people who wanted you to believe every prosecution, every raid, every selective investigation, every leak, every abuse of power, the processes of the punishment, that was just the system working exactly as intended. No, it was weaponization. It was ideological enforcement. It was political lawfare dressed up as principle. And it wasn't just about my father or my family. We were the main target, obviously, because we stood in the way. But the broader machine was aimed at anyone who challenged the ruling dogma. Okay? Parents, Christians, pro-lifers, normal people who refused to kneel down, to bend to their will. Again, we were the number one target, but there were plenty out there. They wanted to make sure that anyone who had the guts to perhaps ever step into that ring, to challenge those fake norms, that weaponized injustice, they wanted to make sure they never put their hat in the ring. It's what they tried to do to my father. I'm sure it's what they'll try to do to him again. And while that was going on, Democrats were still trying to rig the system anywhere else they could. Just look at what moderate Governor Abigail Spanberger is doing in Virginia. There it is, guys. Another elite scheme to nullify the constitutional system because they don't like the outcomes when normal Americans actually get a say. When normal Americans, normal states, when their opinion matters, we're going to do whatever we can to negate that. They always dress it up in the language of democracy. It's about making sure that a handful of metro area elite institutions can override the rest of the country forever. That compact is not some sort of noble reform, guys. It's an end run. It is a rigging operation in a suit and tie. And the common thread between all of these stories? The left doesn't trust the American people. They don't want you to have any say. And it doesn't want them to determine their own destiny. They don't trust citizens. They don't trust constitutional limits. They don't trust borders. They don't trust faith. They don't trust local communities. They don't trust voters unless the voters are completely managed, unless they're just pawns for the Democrat machine. They trust bureaucrats, obviously. They trust, their paid activists. They trust institutions that they can capture. They trust systems that they can game. And they trust media allies to cover the whole thing up. Which is why when one of their own gets exposed, like, Eric Swalwell, they don't suddenly rediscover principle. They just go straight into protection mode. They go into the cover-up. Ignore, lie, deceive, cover, cancel. They hide it all. And this is actually a pretty clear snapshot of the country right now. On one side, you have real momentum. You have energy growth. You have market confidence. You have the border getting back under control. You have an administration that actually believes in enforcement. On the other side, you have sanctimony without standards. You have corruption without shame. You have politicians like Swalwell who want one legal system for their enemies and another for themselves. You have blue state insanity that puts illegal aliens over taxpayers. You have institutional games to rewrite elections when they don't like the map. And you have years of documented weaponization against Americans who simply refused to go along with it. That's the choice. Not Republicans versus Democrat in some old, stale, abstract sense. Order versus chaos. Strength versus weakness. Citizens versus institutions. Truth versus propaganda. And yes, guys, normal people versus frauds. Because that's really what so much of this comes down to. Frauds. Fraudulent moralizers. Fraudulent prosecutors. Fraudulent public servants. Fraudulent reformers. And, of course, fraudulent experts. And one by one, their masks keep slipping. And that's why we're here to expose it in episode after episode. So pay attention. Share this with your friends. Make sure they understand exactly what's going on because you won't see it. On the rare occasion I even tune into the mainstream media, guess what I don't see? Any of this. Literally almost any of it. First, check out all the latest predictions on Polymarket. So if you follow politics, everyone's got an opinion. But on Polymarket, you actually get real odds on what's likely to happen. Polymarket is a prediction market where people trade on real events, elections, debates, policy moves, and it doesn't stop at politics. There are markets on the economies, tech, sports, pop culture, and so much more. It's all live, it's transparent, and it gives you a real-time indicator of what people really think is going to happen. So go give it a look at polymarket.com, check it out, and let me know what you think. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribing so you never miss one of these episodes, okay? Download the Rumble app so you can watch with your whole family and educate them all on your smart TV. Check out our incredible sponsors down below and in the video description, okay? It's a really big deal. It takes guts to support a show like this. It takes guts to stand up to this nonsense because the target's going to be on those people as well. So support those who share your values and check out those sponsors, okay? Before you leave, remember, like, share, subscribe. Hit the like button. It takes like 0 time, okay? It takes 2 seconds. hit the like button. Make sure we beat the algorithm. Share it with your friends the second you get off. Just share the link with them. Let them watch it. Tell them to do the same. And as always, guys, stay strong, stay informed, stay engaged, and always stay a little bit triggered. Thank you, guys. Can't wait to see you again next week. I'll talk to you then. Do all of those things now. It matters. We'll see you soon.